Thousands of years ago, when the slowly rising sea stabilized and formed the present Florida shoreline, one physical factor was to dominate the course of natural evolution and development of our South Florida ecosystems. Water. Warm tropical seawater interacted with the fresh water flowing off the land and created a brackish water environment. A large community of marine life developed and thrived. Mangroves formed a dominant community along the water's edge and became the base of the food web for 70 to 85% of the life in our surrounding seas. Inland, an annual 55 inches of rainfall produced a wetland system of rivers, lakes, and marshes. A diverse and abundant population of plants and animals evolved in this water-dominated environment. Moderate fluctuations of seasonal temperatures in South Florida have little impact on the life cycle of the natural inhabitants of the wetlands and estuaries. Rainfall, however, has formed two distinct hydroperiods, one wet, one dry, playing a major role in controlling the cycles of life in these habitats. Surface waters originating as rainfall created our wetlands and estuaries. The South Florida wetland system begins as rainfall collected in the lakes of the upper Kissimmee Valley just below Orlando. The system ends in Florida Bay. This vast system of lakes, rivers, marshes, floodplains, and ponds is called the Kissimmee Lake Okeechobee Everglades Drainage Basin, collectively known as KLOE or Chloe. For thousands of years, this wet season, dry season pattern has established an ecological relationship between freshwater wetlands and the coastal marine environments and their inhabitants. There are four physical factors of the South Florida freshwater surface hydrology which interact, creating a unique estuarine ecology. They are, 1, how much rain falls on the land and the volume of runoff to the estuaries. 2, the location of the freshwater outflow into the estuaries. 3, the natural quality of the surface water. 4, the timing of the surface water outflow to the sea. A southerly flow of surface waters originating as wet season rainfall filled the lakes of the upper Kissimmee Valley. These lakes overflowed into freshwater marshes connecting the many lakes of the Kissimmee chain. The marshes served as natural kidneys, cleaning the water as it moved slowly southward. Most of these marshes do not exist today. Responding to the needs of agricultural and urban interests for water and drainage, a system of public and private structural water management evolved. The water managers can now manipulate the surface waters. The water priorities are established by man's needs. The marshes no longer connect the lakes. Replacing these marshes are canals running from lake to lake with control spillways and culverts. The Water Management District can now control the timing, quantity, and the location of the flow of surface waters through the lake chain of the Chloe Basin. A negative consequence of this policy has been a significant lowering of water quality. Nature's kidneys, the marshes, are no longer a part of the surface flow system. Large amounts of contaminants and enriching materials from urban, suburban, and farm and dairy runoff now flow unfiltered toward South Florida. This surface flow of artificially enriched water results in a process called cultural eutrophication. Too much enrichment in the water results in the wild and uncontrolled growth of planktonic algae and water weeds. This overgrowth upsets the natural balance of lakes, rivers, canals, and water impoundment areas. They become choked with water weeds. A sudden die-out of these water plants results in an anaerobic body of water unable to support any life. Lake Kissimmee receives most of the channelized water from the upper Kissimmee Valley, sending it on to Lake Okeechobee through the C-38 canal. Before modern water management practices, the Kissimmee River connected these two big lakes. This shallow river ran a 98-mile meandering path through the lower Kissimmee Valley and was the center of an extensive marsh, often flooded during the wet season. Southward moving waters slowly flowed through this marsh and flood plain, providing natural wetland habitats for a large and diverse population of wildlife. In the early 1960s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers channelized the Kissimmee River into a narrow, 30-foot deep, 52-mile-long ditch, diverting the water from the oxbows of the river and draining the adjacent marshlands. A series of 6 locks and spillways were installed to create 5 water impoundment areas that allowed the Water Management District to control the water levels according to priorities determined by the district. The justification given for this $35 million project was flood control in the Kissimmee Valley. Much of the drained marshland became available as permanent pasture for the large dairy industries located along the river. Other portions of this drained marsh were opened up for development. Today, Upper Kissimmee surface waters make their journey to Lake Okeechobee without the benefit of the cleansing and filtration from the marsh. Runoff of organic waste from the dairy herds along the edge of the C-38 canal add a significant load of enrichment to the lake water as it enters the northern end of Lake Okeechobee. Lake water quality has been deteriorating since construction of the canal. The northern end of the lake is becoming culturally eutrophic. After the C-38 canal was in operation a while, Florida sportsmen and concerned officials began to notice a reduction in water quality, as well as a reduced population of fish and wildlife in the lower Kissimmee Valley. Many feared a serious mistake had been made. Their fears have been borne out. Channelization of the Kissimmee River was a blunder. The state of Florida is now committed to restoring the Kissimmee River and its marshes to the greatest degree practical. As a test, 3 steel weirs have been installed in a 12-mile section of the canal in hopes of returning the canal water to the old river channels and marshes. The experimental project is showing great promise. The resulting improvement in water quality has been a very positive sign to the Water Management District. Coming into Lake Okeechobee from the northeast side is Taylor Creek, which runs through miles of pasture land and contributes a great deal of organic runoff from cow manure into the lake. Nubbin Slough, a little further south, runs through extensive dairy pasture land and sends enriched nutrient runoff into the northern portion of Lake Okeechobee as well. The Water Management District now has projects in the works to try to reduce the nutrient load from these 2 sources. Fish Eating Creek flows into the western portion of Lake Okeechobee. This natural river still has its floodplains, marshes, and swamps intact. Water that flows into the lake from Fish Eating Creek is very high-quality water, demonstrating nature's own purification system. During times of heavy rains or hurricane floods, rivers and creeks spread their surface waters over their floodplains, and the aquatic vegetation slows the southern flow of the flood waters, reducing the impact of the flood to the areas downstream. Before major channelization projects, Lake Okeechobee would overflow its southern banks during Florida's wet season. A slow southern flow through the 40-mile-wide, 100-mile-long Everglades sawgrass marsh ran its course into the estuaries of Florida Bay. This broad, shallow flow through the river of grass is described as sheet flow. The periodic flow of high-quality runoff water established the ecological cycles of life in the freshwater wetlands and in the extensive estuaries of the southern tip of the Florida mainland. As a result of our structural management philosophy, this lake has now been diked. Water now exits the lake only through 6 major locations. On the western side of the lake, the water can exit the lake through the now channelized Caloosahatchee River, the C-43 canal. Spillway and lock systems at Moore Haven and 2 other locations along the canal allow the South Florida Water Management District to lower the level of the lake prior to hurricane season if the dry season storage level is high. This water, dumped into the estuaries around the Fort Myers-Sanibel area, has created ecological disaster. Many species of marine organisms utilize the estuary as their habitat. Some offshore species, as juveniles, mature in the safety of the estuaries and then migrate seaward as adults. During the dry season, salinity is high in these estuaries. Major events in the cycle of marine animals are controlled by the salinity of their surrounding waters. For thousands of years, the animals' biological stimuli were controlled by the annual hydroperiod runoff that created low salinities during the wet season and high salinities during the dry season. When water management practices of the past changed the age-old runoff pattern, the result was a severe loss of productivity and subsequently a disruption of the dynamic equilibrium of the adjacent seas. Now the South Florida Water Management District is changing their freshwater dumping policy. They're reducing the negative impact of the old techniques by spreading out the freshwater outflow over a much longer period of time. The Fakahatchee Strand is a unique mixed swamp forest in southwest Florida. This swamp depends on water to maintain its botanical character, making it an area of natural wonder and beauty and home for most of Florida's remaining panthers. Immediately to the west of the Strand lies the defunct Golden Gate Estates. This network of roads crisscrossing the drained property was once slated to become a large development. Lack of financial support for the project hindered its progress, and it now lies fallow, waiting for reincarnation. The Faka Union Canal, dug to drain water from the development, now remains, draining the life-giving waters from the two sloughs of the Fakahatchee Strand. This loss of water is slowly changing the unique nature of the Strand. Citizens concerned about the loss of this unique strand have been trying to get this canal filled in. As long as it remains, the future of the Fakahatchee is in jeopardy. The Faka Union Canal empties into Faka Union Bay. This channelized water disrupts the estuarine balance, changing the timing, location, and volume of the sheet flow through the marshes and coastal plains, and finally, of course, into the estuaries. The practice of channelizing and reducing sheet flow in the lower Everglades has a major negative impact on the productivity of marine organisms in the Florida Bay estuaries. The historical sheet flow pattern was a major factor in the evolution of the life cycles of crustaceans, insects, fishes, reptiles, and birds that inhabited the Everglades system. These creatures, in turn, were the prey of many of the terrestrial species inhabiting the higher and drier areas. The late Art Marshall, a pioneering hydrologist, described the dependence of the populations of marine fish in Florida Bay on the long-term sheet flow of the Everglades as critical. Marshall said, "The annual spawning season of about 50 species of marine fishes and shellfishes is timed so that the newly hatched young of each year are mobile when the sheet flow is widespread over the broad, flat land of the southern Everglades. The young move landward from where they are hatched into the mangrove shallows, the brackish and freshwater rivers of the region, and even into the shallow freshwater sheet of the southern sawgrass plains." Marshall continued, "This behavioral pattern enables them to escape from potentially heavy predation in Florida Bay and puts the young in shallow water where there is ample food, not the least of which is mosquito larvae. 90% of the mosquito larvae are eaten by young fishes, which inhabit or invade the shallow waters of the southern glades. The Turner River flows from north to south into the 10,000 island area called Chokoloskee Bay in the northwest corner of the park. The small community of Chokoloskee lies just south of the mouth of the Turner River. The upper portion of the Turner River was channelized, creating another disruption of the natural surface flow of fresh water into the area. There is some indication from the Everglades Park Administration that this channelized portion of the river will be restored to its natural state. Historically, the estuaries of eastern Florida Bay and the 10,000 islands received water from the vast Everglades sheet flow, originating at the southern end of Lake Okeechobee. In the southeast, the sheet flow moved through Taylor Slough and into East Florida Bay. Presently, the eastern portion of the Everglades and Taylor Slough is being impacted by the waters draining into Barnes Sound through the C-111 Canal, which is also known as the Aerojet Canal. The canal removes fresh water from the southeastern marshes and increases the rate of saltwater invasion and intrusion beneath and above the southeast mainland. The Aerojet Corporation built a solid fuel missile plant in the southeastern Everglades. The state of Florida built the C-111 canal to enable Aerojet to barge missile components out to Barnes Sound and then on to Cape Kennedy via the inland waterway. The government contract to build the missiles was not awarded to Aerojet, so it was shut down, leaving the canal to drain eastern portions of the Everglades. This upset the natural brackish water balance of eastern Florida Bay, and the resulting loss of productivity in East Bay has been dramatic. A plug was put in the canal just north of Barnes Sound to reduce the degree of saltwater movement inland, and this improved conditions partially. However, the commercial and sport fishing interests in East Bay have suffered a severe loss in both the economic and the recreation value of this area. Currently, there is a move by the Aerojet Corporation to reopen its Everglades solid fuel plant. This would require removal of the plug in the C-111 and add more development pressure to the eastern Everglades. Southwest of the Taylor Slough region, the Buttonwood Canal connects Coot Bay to Florida Bay in the Flamingo area of Everglades National Park. The dredged Buttonwood Canal has a negative effect on the sheet flow in this region because it collects and drains fresh water from the area, contrary to the historical pattern. The Buttonwood Canal has not been filled, despite urgings from ecologists. But the canal does have a plug at its southern end, reducing the rapid draining of sheet flow and the inland movement of saltwater into the formerly freshwater marshes. All that remains of the River of Grass, which once originated at Lake Okeechobee, is the Shark River Slough, which runs from the Tamiami Trail to Florida Bay. This marsh and its adjacent coastal prairie still appear much the same as they did for thousands of years. The ecological well-being of this vast, beautiful sawgrass marsh, dotted with its teardrop-shaped hardwood hammocks, depends upon rainfall directly on the area and surface water flowing from the north. This incoming flow into the marsh is now dependent upon periodic releases of water from Water Conservation Area 3, located west of Dade County. Release of water into the slough is accomplished by 4 controlled spillways along the Tamiami Trail. There have been several occasions in the past where the health of the park was threatened by untimely manipulation of the park's water releases, as the Water Management District served man's urban and agricultural demands. This alteration of the natural flow pattern created severe ecological repercussions for the flora and fauna of the Everglades. The district now has a different policy, which times its water releases on a schedule that duplicates the surface flow pattern of historical times. In addition, the Water Management District and the Corps of Engineers are altering canals and levees on the southern rim of Water Conservation Area 3. By canal plugging and levee breaching, some of the impounded water in Area 3 will be allowed to move in a flow pattern responding to natural rainfall and the resulting runoff. Presently, 3 canals control the movement of water from the southern portion of Lake Okeechobee's banks. First is the Miami Canal, carrying Okeechobee water to Water Conservation Area 3, west of southern Broward County and northern Dade County. Second, the New River Canal brings water to Water Conservation Area 2, which lies mainly west of Broward County. These canals are controlled by spillways which separate them from the lake. Pumping stations on the canals allow the Water Management District to pump water from the canals back into the lake for water conservation purposes. This technique, however, is not without its problems. Land around the southern end of the lake hosts a large agribusiness complex of sugarcane fields and mills. They take advantage of the rich organic muck produced by the ancient sawgrass marsh. For thousands of generations, the natural process of decaying sawgrass plants produced organic soils, depositing up to 15 feet of muck over the limestone bedrock. Sugarcane now growing in this muck requires large quantities of water for irrigation and for soil pest control. During the wet season, drainage canals have to take water off the cane fields. Huge pumps along the major canals at the southern end of the lake allow the cane farmers to pump this excess water back into the lake. This back-pumped water entering the lake speeds up the rate of cultural eutrophication in the southern lake waters. Enriched water flows south through the major canals into the important water conservation areas that serve as recharge areas for the Biscayne Aquifer, southeast Florida's sole source of water. A rich nutrient load of phosphorus also speeds up the rate of cultural eutrophication in the water conservation areas and threatens the drinking water supply for the heavily urbanized Gold Coast. In addition, low-quality water flowing through the canals into the southeastern estuaries has a negative effect on marine life in the estuaries. Low-quality water released from Water Conservation Area 3 into the important sheet flow sawgrass marsh of the Shark River Slough also causes ecological problems in the Everglades and in the mangrove estuaries of Florida Bay. Once part of the Everglades River of Grass, two tracts of land called the Rotenberger and the Holy Land became overdrained and diked wetlands. Today they are used primarily as hunting grounds. They no longer play a part in the sheet flow system, which played such an important role in water quality in the Everglades. Hunters' swamp buggies have chewed up the soft wetland soils and created what biologists call secondary succession of vegetation growth. Foraging deer thrive on this new plant growth, and the deer population has increased in these areas. Though this might seem beneficial, it actually creates survival problems for the artificially enlarged deer herds. During excessive rainfall or hurricane floods, the deer foraging grounds are flooded, and the deer seek shelter and food in the elevated hammocks. Vegetation in the hammock is limited and cannot support the large, hungry deer populations. The result is mass starvation and disease, threatening the entire deer population. Part of the governor's plan to save the Everglades is to remove the dikes and reflood the Rotenberger and Holy Land tracts. This would limit deer populations to more natural levels and restore the natural wetland populations of flora and fauna. Sheet flow restored to this area would upgrade the quality of the southward flowing waters for the Everglades National Park and for its important estuaries. Alligator Alley, running from Fort Lauderdale to Naples, serves as a dam across the sheet flow of the central Everglades. The canals along the alley collect the southern flowing water and divert it to outflow canals. The few bridges through the road allow only a small percentage of the sheet flow to continue its southern movement. The alley is scheduled to be replaced by Interstate 75. Governor Graham's Save the Everglades program includes hydrological improvements to the interstate to enable improved north-south sheet flow through the highway. Also planned for this highway are panther crossings to reduce road kills of these animals in the Big Cypress and the Fakahatchee Strand. The three water conservation areas west of the urbanized Gold Coast are vital to the drinking water supply drawn from the Biscayne Aquifer. The aquifer is recharged from surface water filtering through the soil and the rock of the Everglades Basin. Channelization of most of the North and Central Everglades Basin quickly drains surface water out to sea, leaving only the water conservation areas as recharge zones. Retaining this surface water is necessary to prevent saltwater intrusion into the aquifer and the urban drinking water wells. Urban populations along the Gold Coast have grown, and with them, their demand for water. Recharge area capacity has diminished due to increased development and drainage of western recharge lands. As a result, saltwater intrusion has endangered many municipal drinking wells during times of reduced rainfall. The last site for the release of water from Lake Okeechobee is the St. Lucie Canal. The St. Lucie Canal originates at the spillway and locks at Port Mayaca on the eastern edge of the lake. Discharged water flows to the Atlantic Ocean through the St. Lucie estuary in the Stewart area. A lock and spillway system lies between Port Mayaca and the ocean. This canal, like the Caloosahatchee River, is a major channel to lower the lake's water level prior to the wet season. The problems of disrupted salinity balance in the St. Lucie estuary are much the same as for the estuaries on the Gulf Coast. South Floridians enjoy a unique natural environment that adds quality to their lives. A lack of awareness of the role of surface hydrology has resulted in activities creating many of the current physical and biological problems which affect the ecosystem. The natural ecosystem of South Florida is severely stressed by the alterations of man. This natural system serves as a miner's canary, an early warning system foretelling the future ability of the area to provide the life support systems for man. The Biscayne Aquifer is suffering water quality and water quantity problems. The recreation value of the natural system has decreased. 90% of the Everglades bird population no longer exists. Marine productivity of food and sport fish has dropped severely. There is hope for the future, however. Serious attempts to restore a few habitats and some endangered species have met with success. Education has increased citizen awareness and understanding of the role of wetlands and estuaries in maintaining the South Florida lifestyle. Governor Graham has provided leadership in projects to restore some of the natural values of the hydrological system. The South Florida Water Management District is now blending modern structural water management techniques with the natural system, even to the point of restoring some of the historical systems. With awareness and understanding, man can create a man and nature interaction that maintains our unique environment rather than the man versus nature concept that created so many of our present problems. The key is education. There is confidence that with knowledge and understanding, South Florida will protect its most valuable natural resources and leave a natural legacy for future generations to enjoy and from which man can benefit.